Welcome to the Photography Opinion Podcast. We discuss all things photo, video, and camera related. I'm Ben Lucas.
And I'm Stuart Marlantis.
And this is Photo Op.
Welcome to the show. Today we are talking about a big question, which is, what resolution do you actually need your photos to be? So, Ben, let's get to it.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to start by saying that when camera manufacturers come out with a new camera, they're like, whoa, your camera has 12 megapixels? Well, this one has 16. You have to get it. Oh, yours has 16. This one has 21. This one has 36. This one has 50. You have to get... And it's just the megapixel race has slowed down a little bit recently, but
it's taking up in phones, funny enough. Like you see them like, oh, it's 48 megapixels.
Yes. Now it's happening with phones, and then it's happening in video with like, now it's not just HD, it's full HD, which was like 1080 not interpolated, and then it was 2K, and then 4K, and 6K, and now we're hitting 8K. So yeah, it's definitely this race to the top. But you're only going to display your pictures so big. So today we're talking about how big do you actually need? So it really is, how big will you actually display it?
Exactly. And there's a few different categories here. So a lot of people, we'll walk you through them, but we're going to be talking about web size, like social media stuff, print, canvas, and up from there. So we'll go through all the categories and walk through what you actually need for your display or print size of choice.
Yeah. So if you are doing web size, most is Facebook, right? Most of us use Facebook. Facebook is going to downsample your thing to about 1,000 pixels on either side anyway, which literally any cell phone camera since the beginning of cell phone cameras is nearly big enough for that.
Pretty much, yeah. For social media, this is, granted, it's trending up very slowly over time. Like Instagram, I think, started with something like 500 by 500 pixels, and they finally went up to 1,000 by 1,000, or it might be 1080 by 1080. I'm not sure the exact size.
I think it's 1080
right now.
On Instagram
1080
right
by
now.
1080.
Yeah.
So it has trended up a little bit over time, but that's still 1080 by 1080 is tiny.
Quite small. Quite small.
That's quite small. So for web and social media, definitely look up your platform's like native image size if you want to export images that are exactly fitting for that platform. Look up their native image sizes. For your websites, you should really look at as small as you can get away with. Basically, is my rule of thumb for that.
I resized mine to about 1200. That's big enough that it can display full screen, small enough that it hopefully doesn't get stolen for a bunch of uses, and loads pretty quickly on a web page.
Yeah, exactly. 1200 is a good rule of thumb, and as we touched on in our How to Build a Photography Website episode, you want to keep your page loading times as low as you can get away with. So try to keep things small. So 1200 is a good kind of multi-use size without getting things too weighty and loading too slowly.
If you're only doing stuff for social media or web and you're never actually physically printing it, you don't need megapixels. Just like... No. Almost at all.
You need 1 megapixel.
So the next thing that we're getting into is print. So here's a pop quiz for you. Do you know the very first Vogue magazine that used a digital camera? Do you know what the megapixel count of that camera was? I do. Go ahead, take a guess.
I don't.
3 megapixels.
3 megapixels.
Yes. And that was a full cover 8x10. So the very first one was 3 megapixels, and it looked fine. So here's the thing, folks. If you are shooting and you got that Canon Rebel that's only 18 megapixels, that is still 6 more than my first camera years ago, and 12 megapixels I thought was so much more than I could ever need in a lifetime. Of course, I was wrong back then, but... Yeah, so don't be discouraged at low megapixels counts. More megapixels doesn't make you a better photographer, and the very first Vogue magazine shot on a digital back was only 3 megapixels. There's a fun
So
fact for you.
if you can get a magazine out of 3 megapixels, you can get
Yes,
anything
exactly.
out of any
That's
camera.
kind of where we're going with this episode.
Well, that's certainly inspiring. I feel like that's quite the limitation.
So we wrote down a couple of calculations here that we want to walk you through for sizes. So generally, labs like to print at 300 DPI.
Yes, you'll
normally
hear that
you can't
all the time.
print higher than that, or if you can print higher than that, your eyes generally won't notice higher than that. So we ran a couple of calculations. So my camera is a 5D Mark III. So it shoots at 21 megapixels. So at 300 DPI, you can print at 19 inches, which is pretty sizable. That's probably is a little larger than the smallest wall size I print. But yeah, so the smallest one that I offer to clients is 16 inches. So 19 inches at 300 DPI. If you lower that to what most labs either actually print at or recommend as their minimum, that's usually 150 DPI.
150.
When we say DPI, that is dots per inch. That's how dense printing is.
Yeah, that's how resolution works in prints. Since they aren't pixels, they're dots of color per inch.
Right. So at 150 DPI, that is 38 inches. So that is a wall-sized thing.
Yeah. Huge.
The next one that we're looking at is the Sony A7 III,
Which is my primary camera.
Yeah, that is only 3 megapixels more. That is 24 megapixels.
24 megapixels.
So it is a very small jump in megapixels, 21 to 24. But now at 300 DPI, you can go up to 20 inches. Or at 150, you can go up to 40 inches. And we are going to make one more jump here. So the giant big kahuna, the picture on my TV here that you're looking at that I took in Iceland was shot on a Canon 5DS. That is a 50 megapixel back. This was actually a panoramic, so I made it much larger. But the Canon 5DS is 50 megapixels, so that is 29 inches at 300. So that is not that much of a jump. So from 21 megapixels to 50 megapixels only goes from 19 inches to 29 inches. So that huge jump does not even get you that much more size-wise. But here's
diminishing
the
returns
thing.
as you go up.
Yeah, here's the thing. Yeah, you get so much diminishing returns. But the next thing I want to talk about is billboards. So your Sony A7 III billboard-sized can print a 50-foot billboard because most billboards are only printed at about 10 DPI.
Yep. Yeah, because you're seeing them from your car so far away for the most part. So, 50-foot billboard.
It is all about viewing distance. If you're not putting your nose right up next to it, you don't need to have that big of a resolution. So you can print a 50-foot billboard, which means on that whopper Canon 5DS, you can print a 72-foot billboard. And that is not using upscaling plugins or panoramic to, make your things bigger. So that is just native in camera.
Oh, but what if I want to shoot for a 51-foot billboard? Then what do I do?
Oh, well, then you're out of luck. That's how that works.
Kind of tacking on, you mentioned upscaling plugins. So if I did want to shoot a 51-foot billboard on my Sony A7 III, and I was just out of luck, you might want to consider, to help you out a little bit and give you a little bit of an extra edge for prints, you might want to consider something like the Gigapixel AI plugin from Topaz Labs. This is something that is getting increasingly a lot of attention and a lot of good results. This AI upscaling stuff has been kind of kicking around for a while and started out pretty darn rough, but it's getting...
I remember I paid a lot of money for an upscaling plugin back in 2009, I think.
more than a decade ago.
Yeah, I paid a lot of money for an upscaling plugin in 2009, and I think I stopped using it by 2012 because Photoshop native upscaling surpassed the ability of my older plugin by then.
Exactly.
So I generally don't need to do a lot of upscaling anyway, but when I do, Photoshop for me like works fine. Is it the best? No, but it works pretty good.
It works pretty good. So definitely use the tools you have first, and try out Photoshop and Lightroom. See what they can pull out for you. If you really need to stretch and you really need to, you just need that extra sharpness, that extra resolution. I would take a look at Gigapixel AI. I've been playing around with it myself recently, and I've been pretty impressed by the results. Not everything is going to work perfectly, but we're getting AI upscaling is getting to a point now where it's starting to be viable more times than not. So I would check that out. I think it's $100, which is pretty reasonable for its capabilities, in my opinion. There's a demo mode that you can try out, as with most of these kind of things.
Hashtag not sponsored.
Not sponsored. But Topaz Labs is doing some really cool stuff. I'm kind of surprised Adobe hasn't purchased them. So check out Topaz Labs Gigapixel AI and see if that can help you out. If you really just need that little bit more.
Adobe actually did purchase the plugin I used to own.
Oh, there you go. So maybe now that we're a decade later, Topaz will be purchased, and in 3 years it'll be put into Photoshop. Who knows? Anyway, just a quick thing to check out.
Yeah, absolutely. And the last thing I wanted to mention on this one too is it also depends on what print material you're putting it on.
That's true.
So if you're putting it on metal actually prints at a lower DPI anyway. Metal only prints at about 100 DPI because of they're putting it dye sublimation directly onto aluminum. So you're getting a lower one anyway than if you would print on like paper. But if you print on canvas, because of the nature of canvas and it has that thick kind of weave to it,
it's got that texture.
It looks like it's kind of pixelated anyway, so you can get away with so much more pixelation. So my friend John, I think, printed like a 56-inch canvas from his iPhone.
Nice.
Like years ago iPhone. So, but he's like, yeah, you can put it on canvas and it looks great. And you can't tell unless you get nose distance, but when you're sitting on the couch across the room, it looks beautiful.
Yeah, as photographers, we have a tendency to pixel peep and really look at a very, very blown up level at our images, and that's great for editing and for being a perfectionist, but how often are you or anybody in the real world ever going to look at your prints, with their nose up against the medium?
If you're doing stuff for a commercial client, will probably pixel peep as close as you will, but literally no one else will.
Yeah, exactly. Of course there are there are exceptions, but for the
most
part,
other photographers,
nobody's going to pay attention.
That's it.
Yeah. Exactly. Any other thoughts, Ben, on what resolution you actually need?
Not really. This is a super short episode, but it is one that I hear all the time, and it is one that frustrates me when people are like, oh, I have to get this new camera because it's got an extra 4 megapixels. I'm like, that gives you like an inch, maybe. Maybe 2. It's not that big of a difference. You don't need it. There are many other features you might be buying that camera for. Megapixels is not one of them.
TLDL, too long didn't listen. Less megapixels than you suspect is what resolution you actually need.
Oh, yeah. Why didn't we just start there?
So that hopefully answers that question for the listeners and watchers on YouTube. What are we doing next, Ben?
We are doing a very special lightning round Q&A episode. So everyone, thank you so much for sending in questions, whether they were YouTube comments or Facebook comments or emails, which you can email into us, hello@photo-op.show. Thank you so much for everyone who asked questions. There are a couple of questions that if you do not hear your question on that episode, that's because it's such a good in-depth question that we are giving it its own episode, its own shot. But we are going to lightning round through as many of those as we could. That's what's coming up next.
There you go. Next episode, answering all or as many of your questions as we can in a special Q&A episode next time.